Well, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to today's International Climate Briefings. Our topic of today is transition minerals. Today's session will be, as I said, focused on transition minerals and their impact on indigenous peoples and local communities' land rights. My name is Paula Alvarado, and I'm honored to guide you through this crucial topic. Our group of international consultants aims to foster a deeper understanding and pave the way for informed advocacy and action. We are developing and delivering policy briefings on topics that are of great importance in the upcoming international meetings. For example, today's topic will be one of the main themes to be discussed at the coming New York Climate Week. We hope that the information we share today will be useful. This is the first of two transition minerals briefings. The next one is on August the 21st, and my colleagues have already put on the chat the registration link if you want to register already. Or you can wait until the end of the webinar and decide then. We will have, this presentation is divided in different stages in three parts. And we have the overview that I will do. Then we have three panelists invited and a Q&A session. And it's super important for us and super useful if you could please just take a few minutes at the end of the webinar before you leave us for today to provide the feedback. It's important for us to know if this information is useful, if it was delivered in a format that is easy to understand, and also what else would you like to know about this topic? What are the things, the topics that you would like us to include in the next webinar on August 21st, or to deliver further down the road towards the COP30? This group of consultants intends to continue that journey with you. So, allow me now to introduce our speakers. We have first, Lesley Muñoz Rivera. Lesley is from the Coya people in the community of Copiapó, Chile. Her community is defending its territory against the mining of gold, silver, copper, and increasingly lithium. Our second speaker of the day is Matti Blind-Berg. Matti is the chairman of the Sami Association in Sweden and a reindeer herder. This association forms a vital part of Sami society in Sweden, providing a cultural and social meeting place for all Sami, contributing to a strong community and to preserving their cultural heritage, especially among young Sami people. Our third speaker of today is Beverly Besmanos. Beverly is a national coordinator of Bantai Kita, Publish What You Pay, Philippines. Since 2013, Bantai Kita, Philippines has campaigned for transparency measures in the country mining code and the removal of unfair fiscal incentive for mining companies. So these are our three speakers for today, and now let's get started. So what are transition minerals? There is all this, people talk a lot about transition minerals and critical transition minerals, but let's just level the ground a bit and talk about what are these transition minerals. Transition minerals are naturally occurring substances, often found in rocks, and their use in renewable technology. These minerals include more common substances like lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, and also what are called rare earth elements, or REEs. Despite the name, rare earth elements, these elements are not really geologically rare, but are highly useful due to their unique properties when mixed with common metals like iron, for example. Rare earth minerals contain one or more of these rare earth elements. Okay, so when you have one or more of these elements in a rock, that becomes a rare earth mineral. So it's a combination of different components. So how are they used? Well, the push for a greener economy is driving, as we have all experiencing, a significant increase in demand for these minerals. These are essential for producing renewable energy technologies such as wind turbines, solar panels, and electric vehicle batteries. They're also used in private transport, weapons, and various other industries. The demand for these minerals is growing exponentially. And as the world moves away from fossil fuels, we will see even a bigger jump. Just between 2017 and 2022, the demand for lithium has tripled. Nickel rose by 40%, and cobalt jumped by 70%. Achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040 will require a six-fold increase, six-fold increase in the use of these minerals, pushing the market value to over $400 billion. So where are these minerals found? It's estimated that between 50 to 80% of global transition minerals reserves are located within or near indigenous territories. 50 to 80%. Let's just stop for a second and think of that number. 50 to 80% of global transition minerals are located within or near indigenous territories. Let's start thinking, what does that mean if we're considering that there will be a six-fold increase by 2040, which is not far away. This increase will basically lead to major mining activities in areas that are rich in these minerals. We have lithium, found abundantly in the lithium triangle, Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. We have cobalt, mainly mined in the DRC, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we have nickel and copper, for example, with significant deposits in Indonesia, the Philippines, Russia, and Peru. I am Peruvian, so I can maybe just share a little bit of the experience in Peru, and I can say that indigenous communities in Peru have voiced a strong opposition to mining in their territories due to environmental, cultural, and social impacts. In Peru, over 70% of the country mining concessions overlap with indigenous territories. And this highlights the extensive impact on local communities. I'm just going to share with you a map on the next slide. And this map shows where major deposits of some of these minerals are located. Just to give you a reference, I have to apologize. This is a technology AI generated map, so it's not perfect. And I would have liked to overlap this map of minerals with communities, but to protect the integrity of the information about territorial communities. And because also this information belongs to the communities, not to the web. I haven't done that. I have just marked major global deposits of transition minerals that are available to everyone. But it's just a reference so you can see where they are. In the next map, in the next slide, sorry, we're going to talk a little bit about what is expansion and extraction. So, and how is this happening? I mean, it might seem common sense for companies to obtain consent from the communities who govern and depend on these natural resources before starting a project. However, mining companies have a long history of opening mines without permission, often in outright opposition from impacted communities. The intersection of these mining projects with indigenous communities raises issues about indigenous people's rights, environmental justice, and the adequacy of current international safeguards. The rush to meet market demands for transition minerals will exacerbate social inequalities in already vulnerable areas. So what are the environmental and social impacts? On the next slide, thank you. Mining can devastate the environment if done unsustainably, leading to deforestation, biodiversity loss, water pollution, and dewatering. For example, extracting a single ton of lithium requires 2 million liters of water. 2 million liters of water. over 50% of global copper and lithium production occurs in areas of water scarcity. These are communities that are already struggling in countries that are already struggling with water access. And this is where, for example, copper and lithium are, 50% of it. Without proper management, decreasing demand for critical minerals risks perpetuating commodity dependency, exacerbating geopolitical tensions, and creating environmental and social challenges. These impacts include threats to livelihood, health, human security, and human rights, especially for indigenous peoples. What is this rush then for clean energies? The mining industry is booming, and is booming also due to the demand for green products like electric vehicles and solar panels. Governments are supporting investments to respond to the climate crisis, which is a welcome shift from fossil fuels towards electrification. However, the mining sector tends to exploit this urgency to evade oversight, especially in indigenous lands and waters. This narrative of critical minerals drives a sense of urgency, sometimes sidelining international safeguards and indigenous rights. So what can we do? Or what can we all do? Free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC, is the first line of defense. It's crucial for protecting indigenous communities' rights when developing projects that may affect their lands. Despite its importance, the mining industry often resists FPIC protocols, viewing them as obstacles to economic development and project timelines. This resistance can lead to conflicts, social unrest, and long-term harm to communities and the environment. All these are things that everybody here is familiar with. At COP28, governments agreed to triple renewable energy capacity by 2030, requiring a significant increase in the supply of critical energy transition minerals. Indigenous leaders and advocates have opportunities to engage in policy dialogues to ensure their voices are heard, pushing for a stronger FPIC implementation, advocating for sustainable mining practices, and participating in international forums and decision-making processes. Now, there is a movement to do that, the Just Transition, and the Just Transition aims to ensure that the shift to low-carbon economy is fair and inclusive, particularly for those affected by climate change and economic shifts. However, mining for transition minerals often occurs in indigenous lands without their free, prior, and informed consent, violating their rights as affirmed in the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Advocates for a just transition emphasize the importance of indigenous leaderships and co-ownership in renewable energy projects, for example, is an alternative, ensuring that transition to clean energies is equitable, respects human rights, and delivers shared prosperity. Now, of course, as we all know, this is easier said than done. And to be able to change the narrative of today and to change the pace that we are moving, we need to work together and collaborate across all sectors. What is super important is to continue, as from different sectors, to continue supporting indigenous leadership. Because climate policymakers are pushing for more mines as a solution to climate change. It's important to also think that more mines is not really the only truly sustainable solution. We need to think of way of managing the resources, of working with renewable energies, of recycling what is already available, and not rush the consumption and the opening of more mines in a sense of panic and lack of planning. Co-ownership of renewable energy projects, for example, community revenue sharing, developing local skills and employment opportunities, all these are discussions that are not really happening yet. There are models that show that a fast and fair transition to renewable energies is possible, with Indigenous rights are respected and integrated into the decision-making process. In addition to respecting FPIC, it's crucial to expand funding for a development of alternative to mining, including recycling programs, as I just mentioned, reducing mineral dependence, and increasing the efficiency of transitional minerals. And also changing the way we consume the resources of this planet and maybe learning to consume less. While transition minerals are vital for a global shift to renewable energy, it is imperative to address the adverse impacts of on Indigenous peoples. A truly just transition must respect Indigenous rights, ensure environmental sustainability, and promote social justice and social equity. I am going to invite now the panelists, but before we do that, I invite you to just take a pause. I have maybe run through all this information to make sure that we have a space for and time for the most important part of this webinar, which is the Q&A, your questions and the answers of our panelists at the end of today's seminar. But I would like us just to reflect for a second if you have any questions about transition minerals from the policymaking space, with so many events coming up and so many discussions ongoing. And if you do have questions, please start putting them in the Q&A, the questions and answers sector, or you can also add them to the chat, and my colleagues will copy and paste them in a document that then will be very useful and very important, because it will inform the content of the August 21st webinar, which I hope that you will join. So let's now welcome our panelists, starting with Lesley. Welcome, Lesley. Lesley Muñoz Rivera will discuss with us the challenges and resistance against mining in Copiapó, Chile. So now maybe, Roisin, we can close the presentation and so we can see Lesley.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
There we go. Is that okay?
Yes. And so Lesley, welcome.
Hola.
So, hola,
buenos días.
Buenos días, Lesley. And to the audience, I will do this quick round of questions for Lesley in English, but she will respond in Spanish. So if you don't mind to switch the interpretation channels, unless you speak Spanish, you can start listening to this through the interpretation channels. And Roisin, if I speak in English, they will hear me in English as well, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect, that's great. Okay, so welcome, Lesley. Yeah. Lesley, as I have said before, you're a woman from the Coya indigenous community in the Copiapó community in Chile. Could you tell us a little bit more about your community and its relation to its land, to its territory?
Muchas gracias, Paula.
Thank you very much, Paula. And thank you all for being here today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am part of the Coya indigenous community in Copiapó in Chile. This is in the north of my country, Chile. My community is located around 1 hour from the Maricunga salt region. This salt area is like a lake, a salt lake, let's say, has high concentrations of lithium and of salt, of course. So when you see a salt lake, you see the big salt on top and then the lithium below. My community is very connected to this salt lake. It has a lot of water there as well. And this is what keeps our community alive. And if something happens there, it could really affect us. The connection that we have with water is very important because we can survive and live in that territory thanks to the water, because we live in a desert. So you can imagine how important water is for us. Our community also lives using herbal medicines, herbs, plants, and cattle, farming, and we travel or go from place to place in the mountain range according to the seasons. Now, if it is winter or summer, we go higher or up in the mountains, depending on whether the ice melts or not, you know. So that is how we move in the mountains so that we can feed our cattle. And this is what my community does. So, you know, water is so important for us, and the salt lake is so important for us because this is what helps us to keep living, to keep, you know, growing as a community. And sometimes we, the community, have to, you know, are forced to go into the city, like myself, you know, we have to go to the city to work and study. But for us, going back to our community is really important so that we can go on living and existing where we are.
Sorry to interrupt, you're on mute.
Thank you. Of course, this had to happen. You always forget to unmute yourself. I was just fascinating imagining, Lesley, what the community movement was, and with all your different animals and following the natural path of water. Can you tell us then, I mean, there is a bit of an obvious question, but maybe we can dive a little bit more into the details on how does lithium mining of the salares affect the people? I mean, water is the obvious question, but maybe we can go a little bit more into the details.
Yes, thank you. Mainly, I would say that there are some projects that have been approved to, you know, exploit lithium, but we see some examples of what is going on in the north of our communities, in the lands that belong to the Likanantai community, and they are suffering. Or they have been suffering from lithium exploitation for the last 40 years. And we don't want to get to that point. We see what is happening also in Jujuy, Argentina, how the communities are affected by lithium exploitation there, how there is water scarcity now. So I would say that the lithium industry could really affect our Salt Lake, our area. You know, we have the Atacama salt area, which is huge, and there are many projects there that want to extract lithium from there. So far, we have one project that has been approved. Another one has also been approved to exploit lithium, but the High Court of our country, you know, has decided that that this mining industry hasn't consulted us, so they stopped that exploitation project. There's another project called Salar Blanco, the White Salt Lake, and it was bought by a big company called Codelco. And there's a lot of interest in Chile to exploit the salt lakes of Chile. So there's like a new market, salt lake markets in Chile, let's say. So the extraction method, you know, to extract lithium from the salt lakes is just using all the water. You know, and what they do is to extract the water from the salt lake and let it dry. So they let the sun do the job because, you know, we have a lot of sunlight here. So they dry the water and then they get the lithium. I am explaining it very, you know, generally, right? And you said that they, for 1 ton of lithium, they need 2 million liters of water. So I would say here even more. So we have a small salt lake, and there are 2 projects already that are interested in extracting lithium from our salt lake. I think the threat is huge, and the damage to the water and to the environment and to the communities is enormous. We depend on that water. So this is, I would say, our big problem, that we are facing today.
Thank you, Lesley. No, that's yes. I mean, the scenario that you're describing is heartbreaking, and it's a scenario that we see in different communities, as you say, in Argentina and Chile as well. Now, you mentioned that your community was not part of the consultative process. How come, and what mechanisms do they exist in Chile to involve the voice and opinion of the communities? Can you just expand a little bit more on that, please?
In Chile
we have a contract approved also for the consultation, which is regulated, which is works here by law. What is really hard in this issue about communities and all the owners of those companies that want really to explode. So they say, no, these communities are not gonna be affected, and then we can include them in this contract. And that's what happened with those 2 contracts approved. The first one was sent, and the other one not, to this consultation. And now this is part of Codeco. So from that moment, the opportunities that we have regarding the resources legally, that's what my community is doing right now. In the environmental community, we are in different processes, and it's not being yet recognized, this consentment, and we have lots of doubts about what is going to happen in this process, because there is no an answer about what is going to happen. On the other hand, the lithium strategy says that, yeah, they are going to respect indigenous people's rights, and that's why they came into operation with this chain. But this is not happening as they said.
Thank you, Lesley. Thank you. Super interesting, and as I said, very, very worrying. Can we just talk about something related to this? I mean, this lithium strategy run by the government or pushed by the government, it has been approved, of course. I'm curious, what is the civil society people's attitude towards the extraction of lithium in the salares? I'm talking about the Chilean person who is not indigenous, who is in Santiago or in Valparaiso, who sees these things happening. What is the general sense in terms of the media, the news? How are they describing this situation?
Unfortunately, lithium is like the white gold in Chile, like the safer of the Chile economy. When we talk about national companies being part of this lithium exploitation, those who are not from here, they think that this is like an opportunity to grow employment, economy, has happened in the past. So it's like a safer, right? I think that this is like a safer in this process of recession here in Chile. So it is important to raise awareness about the lithium situation here in Chile, because it's going to destroy communities and the ecosystem also, because this is a very fragile ecosystem in that place.
And if lithium is a white gold and is a savior of Chilean economy, then how is the resistance or the questioning from Indigenous communities perceived by non-Indigenous groups? Are they, is your quest, is your ask understood and supported?
Depende, porque también los pueblos indígenas son vulnerables en el sentido
Depends because indigenous peoples are vulnerable in terms of poverty and in terms of employment. So for some of them, it is good to extract lithium, and for others, it's not good. Like in our community, where we don't see the future in extracting lithium in Maricunga, salt flat or lake.
Thank you for this great presentation. This has given us an insight of what's happening in your community and in Chile with lithium. We are now taking all the speakers to the north of Sweden, and I would like to introduce Matti Blind-Berg, who will talk about the situation of the Sami communities in Sweden, which I can let you know already that is not very different. It's just the system seems to be a bit more sophisticated. Matti, hey, Matti, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. So please, let's start with talking a little bit about you as the chairman of the Sami Association and a reindeer herder. Can you tell us a little bit more about the relation of the Sami people and the reindeer, as well as the territories where you live for centuries? You're unmuted, Matti.
You hear me now?
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've tried to explain it as simple as possible, but it's not my mother language, English, so it's a little bit difficult. But the Sami culture and the Sami people are depending on the reindeer and herding, because that's the ground where the culture had developed from, herding reindeers. And the reindeers move in migration from the high mountains in the summer and down to the forest in the winter for protection and food in the winter time. And so in that way, of course, the land is everything we need to survive, because we are depending on the reindeers. We have the reindeer for food, for clothing, for transportation. And that's what the whole culture is circular around. And of course, today the traditional way of reindeer herding is threatened from this green transition, the foresting, everything that's going on in the modern society, many times come in collisions with our traditional lifestyle. And I live up in the north, outside the city of Kiruna. For those of you who know something about mining on the planet, you maybe know that Kiruna is a big iron ore resort. So been here for 100 years now, the Kiruna mine. So mining is something I know.
Exactly. Yes. As you said, Matti, the land is everything. Let's talk a little bit more about Kiruna. Let's go deeper into Kiruna. Maybe the people in this room are familiar with it, but I think it's also a fascinating reminder of the things that can happen to mining towns that are built on indigenous territories. And as you said, Kiruna has been mined for over 100 years.
Yeah.
Kiruna, just to give the audience a general overview, has a population of about 25,000 people, and as an area is the size of Slovenia. They've been mining iron ore, which is a key, a valuable mineral for over 100 years. And today it's home to Europe's largest deposit of rare earth minerals.
So
using the green technologies. Yes, so they say, exactly. So let's talk a little bit more about Kiruna, Matti. What happened in Kiruna? Can you tell us, please?
Yeah, first of all, I think what Kiruna is most famous for just in these days is the moving the whole city because of the mining. The iron ore mining is eating the old town, and it's just a big hole in the ground. So they have starting to move the city. We have a new city center that moved about 4 kilometers from the old city center. So that's one thing, and people from all the world coming in to see it. It's a big, what's a place for building at the moment. It builds everywhere. And next summer, I think it is, they're going to move the whole church. That would be something to see. A big church and moving on. Like so, but what's going on more, that is more scary at the moment, that because of this green transition economy, or what they call, a lot of new mining is in the project of starting up. We have an old copper mine outside of Kiruna. They're going to restart. They're looking for copper there, and also we know that we have copper, we have gold, we have all kinds of minerals in the ground around Kiruna, Gällivare area, and the whole northern Sweden and Norway also. So it's a very scary future. So this green transition is just a dark cloud in the sky coming up for us that are living on the ground and are depending on the ecosystem to work.
Yeah, and you're also very close to the Arctic, and the Arctic has a very, very, very fragile already system. Yeah,
we are so sensitive for every change in the climate. If I look out, sitting in the room looking out now at the highest mountains in Sweden, the Kebnekaise region, I see it from my window. And through all my life, we have seen snow fields, big snow fields up in the high mountain, but they're gone now. This summer, everything is smashed. Just the glaciers that are still there, but they are black now and they're melting in rapidly. And I think people around the globe think of Sweden, Norway, and Finland as a developed country with a high social, conscious, taking care of it. But everything we hear from Chile, from Peru, from other around, it happens in Sweden, in the northern Scandinavia also, because the only difference is the mechanism and the more sophisticated way to explore and explore.
Can you tell us a little bit more? Can you tell us a little bit more about those mechanisms? Because as you said, it's right. I mean, people look at the Nordic countries as an example in progressive, and there is a lot of investment and support to indigenous communities all over the world. Yet, what is happening in Sweden, for example, how are the consultation process? Go ahead.
For example, Sweden have not ratified the ILO Convention 169. That I find really scary. As a citizen of Sweden, I'm ashamed of a country who doesn't support the indigenous people around the globe in the fight for the nature and for the ecosystem. But Sweden refused to ratify the convention. Also, when the European Union discussing this Critical Raw Material Act, Sweden worked very hardly for that the FPIC shouldn't include in that act. And as long as I know, they succeeded. So FPIC is not a part of the Critical Raw Material Act, and that we could thank the Swedish government for. So I find that also very, very, it makes me angry when I think of it. I don't find word in English for it. Also, when it's a fight going on now for 15 years or maybe more in the region of Jokkmokk about mining. It's iron ore mining, and the government give permission for it to go on, and they said it's be needed for the green transition. So everything today, if you put the word green transition or sustainability in front of it, it's okay to do everything. What's going on in Sweden is the greenwashing. Yeah, you can't call it anything but greenwashing.
Yeah, very, very worrying, very, very concerning. And as you said, once you label something green energy, green transition, it seems to be like it's a narrative of crisis and urgency that is allowing a lot of more of these things to happen, and we see an acceleration of these problems all over the world. Yes.
It is speeding up.
It's speeding up, exactly. It's speeding up. So what kind of mechanisms, what kind of consultations then exist in Sweden? What can indigenous communities in the Nordics, what can the Sami do to have their voices heard and their decisions, their point of view respected? What exists in Sweden?
I think the only way today is go to the court, the legal way, and try every process in court. Because we have nothing else we have no other tools to deal with. As I say, FPIC is not a part. and Sweden has not ratified the ILO convention. So the way to go is go to court.
And are there cases or examples that you can share where that has been successful? Sorry, this is a cliche of all virtual calls. My dog is barking, and I apologize to disturb you.
No, I can't say really.
I can't keep. Go ahead.
I don't. When it comes to mining, I find it really almost impossible for the Sami side to win their case, because as you know, the government says the iron ore mine is important for the green transition. So I find it rather to try to stop anything else of the real metal or cobalt or whatever they want to graphite and what is going on at the moment, to stop that kind of mining. And I'm very afraid it's going to be hard work to stop them. Most impossible. Not as it looks today, but maybe in the future. We mean to
what
put
about
more...
civil society? Sorry, Matti, what about civil society? What about civil society and the media coverage in Sweden? I mean, I'm also curious about what's the support of non-Indigenous peoples to this ask and request from the Sami.
I think it's, of course, they're big into for the environment, for the mountain, wildlife. So that part of the population and civil society, they have support us in a very high grade. But then we have this, we want to have a new car, we want to get more money in the salary and so on. So it's rough. I guess in Kiruna, for example, the salaries are so high, so it's difficult to get any people to work in the service sector or in the school or in the healthcare and so on, because there's much better pay go to the mining industry. So of course, there are, as an individual, you have to make a choice there. It's easy to speak a way of living, but I don't know the English word for it. Leva som man lär.
Yes, to live the life, yes. Thank you, Matti. Thank you, Matti, for this overview. I think this is super enlightening, clear, to see this part of Sweden that we seldom see if we are not involved into what is happening with the Sami people in the country. So let me invite now, thank you, Matti. Let me invite now to Beverly Besmanos. Beverly is from the Philippines, and she will share some of the insights on transparency measures and advocacy in the Philippines. So, Roisin, may I ask you please to start sharing Beverly's presentation?
Yes, of course.
And remember to all the audience that we will have time for a Q&A after Beverly's presentation. You can start asking questions in the chat or in the Q&A section of the Zoom. And it will be great if you tell us to whom are you asking the question, and also share to the next webinar. The link to the next webinar has been shared, so please, if you're interested on this topic, go ahead, click register. We will be back with you on August the 21st at the same time in the same place. Beverly, please go ahead.
Thank you, Paula. Can you just please put the slide on screen? What do you call that?
Full screen, Roisin.
Yeah, full screen.
So presentation mode.
Is it not on full screen right now?
It's
it's not in presentation.
Oh, okay. Let me try again.
Just click on the below. There's an icon down, and you click that so that it will show the full screen.
Yeah. Now, supposedly, for me anyway, it appears as full screen here.
Oh, not yet. Just one more click, I think. Yeah. Or
is it okay now?
Not yet.
Oh.
Maybe you want to close it, Roisin, and put it again and share it again?
Yeah, let me try.
Thank you. So while she's preparing it, I would like to thank Climate and Land Use Alliance, SURGE, and FNCD for this opportunity to share our stories from Mindanao, Philippines. Today, I will be sharing our context of transition minerals mining and its impacts to the indigenous peoples. By the way, our organization is called Bantay Kita or Revenue Watch. We are a national coalition of people's organizations and NGOs in the Philippines, pushing for transparency and accountability in the extractive industry.
Okay, now we're sharing the screen, and Roisin, if you could just click on your computer the little icon that it's next to the number,
Which
then
one?
it should. This little icon at the bottom of the at the bottom of the PowerPoint or the presentation, there is a little icon next to the 40%. I think.
Okay, let's see.
That one, yes, please, yes, click that.
Is that ready now?
No, not yet. If you click
Really?
it, it should expand.
Yeah, I did click, and on my screen it's a full screen now. But obviously it's not sharing the same.
No, maybe you're sharing a different screen on your computer if you
Yeah,
have
maybe
more than one monitor.
maybe I can do the screen sharing.
Okay, if you
Okay,
have it there, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Apologies for that.
No worries.
That really, technology is not always working with us.
So I will try.
Mhm.
Oh, wait. Is it okay now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Beverly.
Okay. So I will be sharing the context of transition minerals mining and its impacts to the indigenous communities in the Philippines. So for a background, the Philippines is among the most mineralized countries in the world. The Fraser Institute, a think tank in Canada, says that the country is the 5th most mineralized country in the world. According to the US Geological Survey too, we have the 3rd biggest gold reserves in the world, 4th in copper, 5th in nickel, in terms of ratio of minerals to our land area. The USGS also values our mineral resources to be at about 1 trillion USD. The Philippines is also identified as the sole producer of chromium ores and concentrates. And regionally and in Southeast Asia, the Philippines ranked 2nd to Indonesia in the production of nickel. And in 2020, the country is 2nd when it comes to mining of phosphate rock, refined copper, and gold. However, mining contributes to only 0.8% in our GDP. And the mining sector constitutes 7.8% of the country's exports. And the employment in mining has a downturn in 2020 with only 7.2% contribution. The total government revenue from mining is only 2.2% as compared to other industries. And these data have showed an unimpressive contribution of the mining sector to our economy. So even with a very low economic contribution to our economy, our government continues to promote mining. With the increased demands of transition minerals for energy transition, our government has projected 190 more mining operations in the country in the next 4 years. And this slide shows the contrast of the transition mineral mining boom and the lived realities of our communities, including indigenous peoples, hosting the transition minerals mining. The traditional livelihoods of the indigenous peoples and local communities, such as farming and fishing, have been affected by the nickel mining operations that are taking place right now in the country. And this has been a recurrent and unaddressed issue of mining in the Philippines. With energy transition, the nickel mining will not be starting on a clean slate in the country. There have been a lot of nickel mining that is already happening in the country years back. We have observed from our community engagement work that when livelihoods are affected, the community's ability to combat poverty and sustain participation to government platforms for development also decreases. Mainly because the people tend to spend more time to make money so they can put food on the table, and at the end of the day, rather than give time for community work and engagement. So how and why are these mining operations and its impacts happening in the country? Among many other requirements, our laws, our mining law and the IPRA law, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, require that a free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC, be obtained from the concerned indigenous communities before undertaking any project or activity that affects the ancestral domains and the resources. The provision also ensures the right of the indigenous peoples to participate in decision-making processes that affect their lives. In 2010, there were 309 FPIC and Memorandum of Agreements, or MOA, cases recorded by the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, or NCIP, in the Philippines. A 2013 NCIP-supported study on the assessment of the implementation of the FPIC in the Philippines studied 34 FPIC cases. And we wanted to focus on the FPIC and the Memorandum of Agreements in this presentation, because this is a very big issue right now in the country, apart from the environmental and other social impacts of mining. In the study, not more than 50% of the cases that are examined attained the status of full and faithful compliance of the FPIC guidelines. 38% of cases have violations in the actual conduct of the FPIC. 29% of cases have violations in the signing of the MOA and the post-FPIC activities. And there is widespread negative perception regarding the fulfillment of the agreed upon terms and conditions of the MOA. In 2016 and in 2017, the USAID and Bantay Kita, our organization, commissioned an FPIC and MOA study. This is another study with selected IP communities and mining companies in Mindanao. Some findings were the IP communities entered into MOA negotiations without adequate preparation, either in terms of procedure of the negotiations, structure of the negotiating parties, framework of bargaining for the negotiables, and clarity on non-negotiables and training negotiators. IP communities had little or none at all time to review the contents of the Memorandum of Agreements. And the IP communities, or even their leaders, do not have a copy of the MOA they signed on. And grievances continue to plague communities due to lack of transparency on implementation of the Memorandum of Agreement provisions and lack of references, especially the lack of the copy of the Memorandum of Agreement itself to inform actions towards resolving issues. Further, the Mining Act and the IPRA law in the Philippines both require royalty payments of no less than 1% of the value of gross output of minerals sold by the contractor or the mining companies. And even with the minimal royalty share that the indigenous peoples get, the IP communities are challenged in terms of managing the royalty funds. The actual situation is that only few members benefit from the resources found within the ancestral domain. The indigenous peoples and even the local communities who are also located in high risks and climate vulnerable areas continuously to bear the brunt of the mining externalities. So there are a lot of recommendations from the case studies. I think I'm not gonna delve on this one by one, but you can see here there are recommendations for the IP communities, which is mostly on the preparation. If the indigenous people will say yes to mining, how prepared are they in terms of the plans that they already have for their ancestral domain? How are they gonna allocate the royalty? How are they gonna manage the royalty? And there has to be a process that they can also get an access and a copy of the memorandum of agreement, and they should be given a right to renegotiate, review or renegotiate the memorandum of agreements. On the FPIC, there are specific recommendations on the strict observance of the guidelines, full disclosure and adequate provision of information, additional efforts to safeguard the IP rights, and enough time and freedom of the indigenous cultural communities or indigenous peoples to make decisions. On building the capacities, there are a lot of things that has to be done. It is recommended that the government should help improve the skills of the indigenous leaders in terms of negotiating and on the process of the FPIC, but also the government itself should also improve their skills to facilitate the FPIC and on the MOA negotiation. And the IP community also needs to improve their skill sets and human resources for the royalty management and negotiation. The IP community is also recommended to enhance their planning and their monitoring and evaluation capacities. So why are these important? Because during the mining operation, sometimes the mining companies and the government are blaming the tribal leaders for accepting royalties wherein they cannot be able to manage. And sometimes this is the reason why the indigenous leaders have the difficulty of asserting a renegotiation of the memorandum of agreements. So it's very technical, but these are the things that we have learned from the case studies that we have conducted and with our journey with the indigenous peoples. So there are also a lot of recommendations on the government policy actions. Even if the Philippines already have our IPRA law and our FPIC law, there are still a lot of policy actions that the government needs to improve, and so that the government and then the civil society can also help the indigenous peoples. So with all these recommendations, our organization was able to come up with initiatives on empowering indigenous communities who are already inside the mining areas. In the country, what we found out is that a lot of technical support are needed by indigenous peoples who already said yes to extractive industries, to mining. If other than indigenous peoples who said no to mining, because those indigenous communities were able to protect their ancestral domains. But a lot of problems are already happening and a lot of support are needed for indigenous peoples who have already signed agreement with mining companies and the government. So these are just some of the activities that we have conducted. I will just highlight some. First, we introduced the Indigenous Peoples Community Wealth Fund, so that the Indigenous peoples were going to think about the intergenerational ownership of the resources that can be found inside their ancestral domain, just to make them realize that the royalties that they are receiving is not only owned by the present generation, but also the future generation. And they have a big role of protecting that and developing that resources so that it can also benefit the future generation. And we have also we have developed a community resource guide for Indigenous peoples. This idea is actually came from the tribal leaders. They said that because it's difficult for them to say no to mining, especially if the government is pushing for it. So they said, please help us understand and give us a resource guide, a checklist on what are we going to remember or to learn when we go into negotiations after we give our consent to the extractive industries. And then some activities would be like a lot of trainings to improve their capacities. And we also help them in developing their community royalty development plan, because this is required by the law. Once they receive the royalty from the extractive industry, they have to prepare a plan on how are they going to use the royalty. And right now, the government doesn't have a good guidelines on this. So a lot of plans that we are seeing is not really a good plan. So if we want to empower communities and Indigenous peoples, we really have to help them learn all these planning skills. And then we did some trainings on business planning, because if they want to manage the royalty, how are they going to develop or improve the ancestral domain if they do not know how to manage their businesses that they wanted to do. And we also have developed some guide for the civil society on how to assist Indigenous peoples in terms of operationalizing their royalty management plans, and a lot of training on capacity monitoring on royalty and management of royalty. So these are just some of the photos of the activities that we have conducted with the Indigenous peoples leaders in the community. And lastly, we have our project that was funded by the Publish What You Pay International. This is the Clean Energy Empowered Communities. This is a project very much related to just energy transition. So with this project, we are helping communities through amplifying their voices for a just energy transition. We are giving legal empowerment trainings so that they can be able to file cases if there are some problems with the mining companies. And we also wanted to support the Indigenous people's traditional livelihoods, because we realized that if we stop supporting, or if we do not support the basic livelihoods of these communities will stop asserting their rights. These communities will stop engaging with the government, because they will be more busy with finding, making ends meet to put food on the table. And I think this is very basic and this is very important. And lastly, on the transition mineral accountability, this is what Bantay Kita is advocating in relation to energy transition. We define this as the need to address the global transition mineral boom alongside democratic principles of community-defined justice and equity that operates through mandatory human and environmental rights due diligence across the length of the green energy supply chain. Transition mineral accountability is further underpinned by the principle of justice that ensures frontline communities and ecosystems hosting the raw materials necessary for a low-carbon future are protected, empowered, and are first to benefit from the mineral exploitation. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Beverly, for this. Yes, now, thank you for closing the presentation. This was incredible, super interesting, and it's the work that your organization is doing. It's really, really impressive. Can I ask you just briefly, before we open the floor for the questions and answers from the audience, can I ask you, Beverly, very briefly, what is the engagement of civil society in these topics? How have they reacted to these, and how much are they supportive or not from the needs to legislate this better, to create better safeguards and more accountability?
Okay, so that's thank you for that question, Paula. This is the civil society right now. For example, from our organization, we are really trying to help the indigenous communities understand the just energy transition, because clearly, when we introduce the just energy transition to them, what they imagine and what they can only understand is it's only mining. So even the term just energy transition, if we translate it into the local dialect, it's so there's no direct translation. The translation is so long. So even with the terms, we have the civil society has that challenge of how are we going to make the communities understand why we need to transition to a cleaner energy and why minerals are necessary. Because right now, what they see in the reality is a negative thing. And right now, what we are also being challenged is that in the Philippines, the civil society didn't come up yet with the unified definition of what is just. So you see, we have civil society working on climate justice and energy, and you have different groups of civil society who doesn't want mining. So how are we going to bring them together? Because we are the same organizations are also assisting communities, but what we are seeing right now, there are a lot more funding support to help communities get access to a cleaner energy, but not enough funding support for communities who are hosting the transition minerals mining. So there is an imbalance there, and right now we don't have the answer on that. But what we know is there has to be a platform even in the Philippines to unite all this civil society, and among ourselves we have to define what is just in the just energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. That's fascinating. A very, very complex answer that requires a multi-approach, multi-systemic approach from the whole society to look at this as one, not as little fractions of a situation. Well, thank you very much, Beverly, and thank you very much to all the speakers for your contribution today. Now we open the floor for questions and answers from the audience. We have just almost 17 minutes left, so we have time for at least a round or two of questions for the speakers. So I need a little support now from my colleagues to find the questions that we are going to ask in the chat. So maybe I can ask, because I don't see them, Filipa or Isabella, could you give me a hand with the questions, please? If there are any direct questions to the speakers. Let's see.
Yeah, I think, Paula, it would be helpful to call on Serge if their representative wants to make any comments about what we've heard and some of the resources that they offer for communities. I think that would be valuable.
Okay, so I'm just first gonna, yes, I can see that we have Serge in the room, and that's fantastic. I will invite Evelyn in a minute to make a contribution, but before that, since I don't see any questions in the chat, please raise your hand if you have a question directly to the speaker. I can see that Mambu Alpha Sano has raised a hand, so I'm going to open that. And please, if you have a question for the speaker, just Mambu, please open your microphone and you can ask a question directly in the room. and we will try to answer it.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good day, everyone. Yeah, I'm Mambu Afasano from Sierra Leone, working with Friends of the Earth Sierra Leone. Yes, I really appreciate the marvelous presentations towards you guys you have done in terms of working with indigenous people and the local people and indigenous people and local communities. It's really fantastic. And my question here is that how these particular institutions is going to establish or extend their activities toward the various regions, maybe West Africa or other regions in the world. In terms of, like, in Sierra Leone, during the 11-year civil war, it's based on illegal activities with indigenous people on mining issues. That's why we got the 11 years civil war in Sierra Leone, which have destroyed so many land in the out-of-reach community. So we have land degradation. So I don't know how best, being that the civil society point of view, and also the other members of civil society group, to working with this particular institution, how best are we going to put our hand together? Where we have the indigenous people are facing a lot of challenges, how are we going to address their need so that they will feel belong? Like,
thank you. Thank you, Margot.
In terms of the hello. In terms of any disaster in any society or any countries, there are two people which they normally facing a lot of calamity, which are the women and the children. So if we can able to address these particular people, how best? Because in terms of this illegal mining which have been taking place in these particular communities, have leave the women and the children have been too porous. It has been a lot of disaster towards the children. Some of them are dropped out from school, and others
Mambo,
are also.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mambo. Okay. I'm going to have to interrupt you now, and so we can let the speakers maybe comment on your question, because we're a bit limited of time. We have understood your question. Okay. So if you allow me, please, maybe I can invite Beverly to comment on it. Beverly, if you have anything to add in terms of, like, maybe commenting a bit how civil society in Philippines has been able to come together with this initiative, and if this is a lesson that can be taken to Sierra Leone, if you have any experience with that, if you could just briefly comment.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for that. In the Philippines, there is a limited number of civil society that works with indigenous communities who are already into the mining areas, or who already signed the memorandum of agreement. Only few civil society are assisting that. A lot of civil society in the Philippines don't want mining. So once the IP community said yes to mining, I think right now the civil society who's assisting them technically on that part is only Bantay Kita. So when you say civil society on mining, it's only Bantay Kita. So what we are doing is really, we are also learning at the same time doing, because a lot of challenges also is not only with the communities, but also on how the civil society will capacitate itself on to be able to give assistance to the IP community. And we know that extractive industry is so technical, very technical. So I think that's also one challenge for the civil society to capacitate itself, and to also bring the voices and raise the issues, so that the funding donors will also be able to, to support civil society, supporting indigenous peoples who are facing all these problems right now of mining.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you. Mark, let me invite you now to ask a question. I see your hand is raised. Please briefly introduce yourself and the organization and then present your question. Nice to see you.
Sure. Yeah, good to see you too. Thank you for this session. So my name is Mark Balondras and I'm with the foundation called Niatero, based here in Seattle, and working to help Indigenous people secure guardianship of vital territories and ecosystems in a few regions of the world, let's say. And my question, I come from private sector kind of background and project development, and I was just wondering if is anybody been looking at these mining projects and companies showing up in Indigenous territories and saying, instead of remaining on the outside of it and dealing with the consent as part of FPIC, has anybody been sort of successfully getting on the inside of the project and securing one or more seats on the board of directors of the specific project and directing or participating in steering the environmental performance of these projects and how it integrates into the territory and interacts with the local communities? So wondering if it's done somewhere or if it's talked about somewhere.
Is anybody of the speakers who would like to answer this question, or anybody in the audience as well? We have people from different parts of the world involved in, working with communities. So I will open the floors for the speakers first. If anybody has examples where Indigenous communities have been directly involved in decision-making processes within the mining sector. Yes, Beverly, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have assisted one IP community that was able to get a number of shares of stocks in a large scale mining company, but the operation is still, it's not like fully in operation yet. But what I can say is that it's really good because, for one, they can be, if they are a stockholder, they can be able to get more benefit because of the revenue apart from the royalty. Second, they can be able to get the reports, right? Like how, because the royalty will be depending upon the gross production report. Thirdly, they will have a say in terms of how are they going to take good care of the environment, how are the laws are going to be implemented, because everything will happen inside the ancestral domain. So those are the good things there. The challenge there is, it's not only the seat that was given, but one thing is, it's a challenge for the IP leadership, how they can also improve their skills in terms of, being one of the, you're also a miner in a way, you're a beneficial owner of a mining operation. So how can you be able to improve yourself too? So for the Philippines, for this specific IP community, that remains to be seen until the mining operation will take place. But my point here is that who is going to give all the technical support for these Indigenous communities who will be transitioning from not only Indigenous leaders, but also as a miners themselves. So a lot of technical capacity building are needed. And I think the government should also think proactively in terms of their support, because ideally there should have been an equal footing, between the Indigenous peoples, the mining company, and the government. All the technical knowledge should be equal, ideally, so that everyone has a fair share of spaces, and in terms of decision making, they can also represent themselves well. Thank you. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Beverly. Before going to Soledad and Ashley, who have their hands up, I invite our colleagues from Search, maybe Galina or Evelyn, who are here. Maybe they want to comment on what they have heard throughout the presentation, or talk a little bit more about the FPIC process and the new guide and the importance of exercising that. So I know Galina and Evelyn are in the room. So if that's okay,
Hi, Paula.
Hi,
Hi, everyone.
Galina.
It's a great discussion. Thank you so much. And it's just wanted to say that it's not a very easy subject to discuss, especially in light of the looming threats that Indigenous peoples are facing all over the world. And what works in one place is not going to work in another place because context is key. You know, if some communities say absolute no, it has to be respected. As someone indicated in the chat, is that free, prior, and informed consent is not a checkbox. It's not preparing the community to say yes. It's actually the right of Indigenous peoples to be consulted through free, prior, and informed, and a community can arrive to either consent or withdrawing consent from a project. So that means actually treating and relating to a community as an equal, you know, and that's what's missing in the conversation. When a company comes to a community, they think like it's supposed, oh, it's a sort of second-class citizens, and they can just approach to anybody and the community and decide what they want to do. But actually respecting those communities and their way of life, their understanding of how they want to choose their political, cultural, and social priorities is absolutely the key. So in our conversations with companies, we say, plan for the no. And this way, you already you're preparing yourself to go through the process. And a community can say yes or no, or maybe, or yes with conditions. That's what means the power of self-determination, the right to self-determination, because a community can decide what works for them. And from there you go. If a community say yes and it's fully informed, and from there they can go with impact benefit agreements or shared prosperity models. But if a community says no, this is their right to self-determination. Thank you. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Galina. Thank you, Galina, for that. Very, very important. A very important reminder that ethic is the beginning of the process and not securing an outcome from the private industry. Soledad, I see your hand up. Please go ahead. You're muted, Soledad.
Hola, Paula. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Paula.
Wherever you are. I found another challenge, and I would like to ask a question wherever in the audience can, whoever can respond to that, or maybe in the panel also. It is not only about creating or igniting the conversation. It is also about creating a common language. You know, most of the organizations I've seen trying to work improving the ethic, coming from the government or coming from the mining company, both are speaking, or most of them speaks, let's say, corporative language. And that's not a language that an indigenous or an affected community can understand easily. So I've been wondering, I've been realizing that it's not only bringing them to the table, but also bringing them to the table in order for them to be able to communicate in one same language, independently if it's Spanish or English or whatever, you know. We are talking about transmitting thoughts and ways of perceiving Mother Nature, which is coming from indigenous people that corporative point of view doesn't have in mind.
Thank you, Soledad. That's a very important point. I mean, in terms of the use of language and understanding each other's context and perspective. Ashley, your hand was up. I don't know if it's still up. We have a few minutes, 33 seconds left. And before you leave, maybe if there are no more questions, since I don't see any more hands up, can I ask you please to answer the survey that is in the link? This survey is super important for us, as you know, and you have all been invited. if you like this webinar, please register for the next one because it will build on the discussions of today. This webinar, even if you couldn't join today, it will be recorded and shared with everybody. So it will be super important if you provide us feedback and also tell us, more importantly, what topics, what content would you like us to discuss in a couple of weeks when we have another set of panelists who will be here for you. So please click on the link and let us know. And I will give you just a few, maybe a minute or so for that. It's only 3 quick questions before we close for today. Hope you can stay 30 more seconds and just reply to the survey before you leave us for today. And as people are leaving, I just have to say thank you to all our panelists and the audience for your engagement and participation today. It's been wonderful. Lesley, Matti, Beverly, thank you. Thank you for today. Thank you for your time and your preparation and for the coordination calls we had before. We will meet again and hopefully we will have more positive stories to share. We are all in this together, and I think that's a message we need to bring to our different societies to see us all as part of one planet.